everybody. So lovely here in Chicago. I want to move to Chicago. I really love it. Hi, I'm Colleen. I'm vegan. Just seems appropriate. And I just want to make sure that we all are really clear about what vegan is, because there's a lot of misconceptions and mispronunciations of vegan. So I just want to make sure we're all really clear, right? Because some people have this notion that there's like normal food and regular food over here, and then there's vegan food over here, like it's a separate food group. And vegans are guilty of using that language too. We say vegan everything. Vegan this, vegan that. I have friends who come over, they've had vegan dinner last night. I know you had a vegan dinner last night, you're vegan. Like, so why are you, I had this great vegan cake. I know, it's vegan, you're vegan. So we need to stop overusing this word. Because vegan just means fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and beans and mushrooms and grains and legumes and lentils and herbs and spices. It's just food we already know, it's normal food. It's food that we're already familiar with, right? Anybody have an apple ever before? Anybody ever have an apple? If you've had an apple, you've had vegan food. I've had people say, I don't think I've had vegan food. You had banana, you've had vegan food. Like, it's a banana. We don't say, I have vegan banana and a banana. There's just like a banana. Like, it's okay, it's just a fruit, so it's vegan. So we've established that, so that's good? Okay, just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page as we start this. So, my name is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau, and the mission and the work I do, let me try that, work for Marla. My name is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau, and the mission in my work is to empower people to make informed food choices, to debunk myths about veganism, to be a voice for animals, and to give people the tools and resources they need to live according to their own values of compassion and wellness. I always say that I am not asking anyone to live according to my values. I'm urging people to live according to their own values. And we see people making these changes all the time. I'm incredibly encouraged by so many people interested in making this change. They have many reasons for making this change. Some people do it for health. Some people don't want to contribute to violence against animals. Some people don't want to contribute to slaughterhouse workers being so desensitized to their own compassion that they do things to animals that are the stuff of nightmares and none of us want to talk about. Some of us don't want to contribute to rainforests being depleted and cut down for grazing land for cattle. Some people don't want to contribute to global depletion and wildlife being killed at the behest of ranchers. We don't want to contribute to the resources that it takes to turn living beings into meat, dairy, and eggs. So pick a reason, and any one of these reasons is good enough to make this change. And I think they get it. I think people really get why vegan. I think where people really struggle is in the how vegan. So that's the question, is why, when people know that there are so many benefits to getting meat, dairy, and eggs out of their diet, why is it so hard for people? Why do we see people slide back? Why do we see so few people try? And I think there are so many reasons for that. I could do a whole talk just on that. And I think actually Robert Grillo will be doing a talk first on our society and what messages we're getting all the time. We're getting messages constantly telling us to consume as much meat, dairy, and eggs as possible. Right? From the internet, from advertising, from billboards, from television, from radio, right? In every way we're being told we need to consume as much meat, dairy, and eggs as possible, right? So we're getting this message all the time. We live in a world that doesn't make it easy for us to make the most compassionate and healthful choices. It actually works against us, right? People say, well, I was in Iowa and I couldn't find a vegetable. Well, that's not the fault of being vegan, that you couldn't find a vegetable in Iowa. Like, that's not the fault of being vegan. That's a bigger problem, right? So there are many reasons why it's difficult for people to make the most helpful and compassionate choices. We live in a world that in many ways embraces animal exploitation and abuse and looks upon those who oppose these things with suspicion. She's compassionate, but she's a little crazy compassionate. She doesn't like eat the animals. Like, she's a little crazy. A little too much compassion. Like, can you have too much compassion? I want to see what too much compassion looks like, right? So we live in a world that sometimes it looks upon that with suspicion and hostility, right? And then we have all of these myths and misconceptions around all of the things related to veganism, right? Myths and excuses around food and nutrition and the animals and history and all of it, the social aspects, all of it. So we have all of these myths that people are operating under, and then they use these myths as excuses to not make the change they really want to make, right? And so the myths around nutrition, I mean, we've all heard the myths around nutrition. It's a joke, right? I mean, the problem is that lessons we've been taught is that the nutrients we need are animal-based, right? We've all been taught that. If I were to ask you where we were taught we're supposed to get our calcium, you would say cow's milk, right? Specifically cow's milk. If I asked where we're supposed to get our omega-3 fatty acids, you would say, and if I asked where we're supposed to get our protein, you would say meat, dairy, eggs, right? All the animal products. Everyone's so obsessed with protein. Protein, protein, protein. We were at a bar last night. A guy who found out we were vegan found out because I told him. I make sure that comes up in every conversation. And just happened to slip out. And the first question was about protein. We're just obsessed with protein, right? It's a 50-year-old man who, like, I think his partner, like, wrote a nutrition book. Like, you know, like, and they're asking about protein. We're so obsessed with protein. I tried being vegan, but I needed my protein. Well, how do you know you needed your protein? Yeah, I just knew I needed protein. But how did you know? Well, my body told me. Well, like, what did your body say? And did it send you an email? Like, how did you know what your body was saying? And that your body was saying, I need protein, right? I don't know, I was tired. That's not a sign of protein deficiency. Like, how do you know that you needed protein? And my doctor said I was anemic, okay? But that's iron deficiency. That's not like protein. Like, we're so obsessed with protein, but none of us knows what protein deficiency looks like, right? We're so obsessed with it. Do me a favor quickly, just do a quick survey. Raise your hand if you've heard of heart disease. Anybody? Good, okay. If you've heard of cancer and diabetes, and you know someone who's on blood pressure lowering medication or cholesterol lowering medication, right? Raise your hand if you know someone with kwashiorkor. Oh, nobody knows anybody with kwashiorkor. That's amazing. You'd think we'd know someone with kwashiorkor, because kwashiorkor is a scientific term for protein deficiency. We're so obsessed with protein deficiency, you'd think we'd know someone with protein deficiency. You'd think we'd know someone with kwashiorkor. Is there a hospital ward nearby? Like a kwashiorkor specialist in the house? Anyone? No? You'd think we would know someone with kwashiorkor. We're so obsessed with that. We don't have kwashiorkor in developed nations. We don't have kwashiorkor because we don't have diseases of deficiency. We have diseases of excess. Everything that you named, that you knew was familiar to you, those are diseases of excess. We don't have diseases of deficiency. Anybody with scurvy in the house? Anybody? Beriberi? Nothing? No? Rickets? Anybody? Right? Because we took care of diseases of deficiency. That's not what our problem is. Right now we're dying from diseases we have no business dying from that are 100% preventable. In most cases, particularly around cardiovascular disease, right? So we're so obsessed with these single nutrients, and we're so obsessed with this, and it's because we've been told these myths about the nutrients we need, right? The question isn't where do vegans get their protein. The question is why have we all been taught that we need to go through the animals to get to the nutrients that the animals got because they ate plants. The nutrients we need are plant-based. They are not animal-based. The only nutrient we need that's not plant-based is vitamin B12, but it's not animal-based either. It's bacteria-based. It's formed on bacteria. So the nutrients we need are plant-based. And what we need to do is skip the middle animal and go directly to the source and go directly to the plants that have all of the minerals and have all of the nutrients, right? When you skip the middle animal, you skip the animal-based saturated fat, you skip the dietary cholesterol, you skip the harmful animal protein, the lactose, the casein, right? And you go directly to the plants and you get the vitamins and you get the minerals and you get the phytochemicals and you get the antioxidants and you get the fiber and the folate, all of which originate in plants. So we need to skip the middle animal because when we are doing what we're doing right now, it makes absolutely no sense from a health perspective, from an ethical perspective, from a resource perspective. I mean, if you just look at calcium to start with, right? Let's back up. I don't want to get ahead of you guys. What's calcium? It's a mineral. Good, thank you. Because something like Cincinnati. I'm kidding. I love Cincinnati. So calcium's a mineral, and where are minerals found? In the ground, in the soil, in the dirt, right? We mine minerals from the soil. We don't mine calcium from cows, right? It's a mineral that's found in the ground. And why do cows have calcium in their milk? Because they eat the grass. Theoretically, most cows, dairy cows, are not eating grass because they're kept on dry lots, because it would be too labor intensive to have them graze all day long and then go get them to milk them 3 times a day. So they're not eating grass. They're not eating grass. That's just this wonderful fantasy we've all been conditioned to believe. So in order order for the dairy industry to live up to its claims that this is a high calcium food, what do they do to the feed of the cattle? They supplement it with calcium. You can supplement your feed with calcium. Like, you could just supplement your feed with food. I'm eating feed right now. With calcium, right? And or just go to the plants, right? But the point is that instead of doing that, we're going through this resource-intensive process that starts with a living animal. And do you know what it takes to stay alive? It takes a lot to stay alive. It takes food and water and shelter and medical care when needed, right? It takes a lot. So you start with a living animal that you then have to impregnate in order to lactate. And I don't remember the first day I heard the word vegan. I don't remember the first time I had tofu. I wish I did. But I remember the day I learned that cows have to be pregnant in order to lactate. And I know there's somebody in the room, you don't have to raise your hand, I won't do that to you, who doesn't know that, because we're not encouraged to know that. We're not taught that cows lactate. We don't say cows lactate. We don't even say they produce milk. We say they give milk. They give milk. Like they come into this world ready to bestow upon humans their nutritional goals. Here's my milk, this is for you, this is what I'm here for, right? That's the language we use. We say they give milk, right? When in reality they have to be impregnated, which means we're talking about someone doing that dirty deed, right? And so she's pregnant for 9 months. At the end of that 9-month period, she has her baby, and humans do not have the corner on maternal instincts and affection. And all she wants at the end of that 9-month period is to nurture her baby. That's it. That's all she wants. That's all she wants. And any farmer would tell you that the only time these vegetarian animals are dangerous is when they're separating their babies from their mothers. And if he's male, and 50% are, he goes to slaughter right away, or he gets chained up for 16 weeks for veal. And if she's female, she goes into the same servitude as her mother. And of course, when she's no longer productive, she's slaughtered after 4 or 5 years, and cows could, of course, live 20 to 25 years, right? Because we have this fantasy that there's some retirement spa for cows. There is no retirement spa for cows, right? There is no such thing as a slaughter-free animal agriculture system. No one will take care of that life, feed him, shelter him, medicate, water, and not get anything in return. These are commodities. It's a business. Milk is like Coca-Cola. It is a commodity. And whatever you can do to reduce the costs and increase the profits, you're going to do. So all of this for calcium, supplementing their feed, impregnating her, and 9 months later you have babies who are just incidental. They exist only because she had to be made pregnant, and then they're killed, and then she's killed after 4 or 5 years. And if you could imagine, I know this is going to be really hard to imagine, but imagine a cow, or a steer, I mean a boy or a girl. He's got, he's born, he drinks his mother's milk, he starts to grow. Imagine this like not being part of the industry. Cattle were once wild, so imagine cattle is wild, and he was allowed to just drink his mother's milk. What would happen after he started growing up? He starts to move on to solid food, right? And he starts getting his nutrients from solid food, right? He's weaned, right? Most of us can identify with this. Hopefully you're weaned by now, right? Hopefully you are. We're weaned, and then we're told, hang on, hold, that's a little too hasty. You now need to drink the milk of another animal, when the offspring of that very animal stops drinking his milk after he's weaned. He doesn't keep drinking. Have you ever seen like a grown bull, like, drinking from his mother? I know you're not all picturing this. Have you seen a grown human? No, you haven't. If you have, I don't even want to know. Where do you see that? I don't know. I'm sorry I put that image in your head, right? But the idea is that we don't consume our own milk into adulthood. Why would we consume the milk of another animal, and even when that animal isn't drinking that milk into adulthood, right? So we need to wean ourselves. We need to wean ourselves. It's time to wean ourselves. And why cows? Why cows? What's so special about cow's milk that it's conducive to human consumption? Why cows? Why goats? Why buffalo? Why sheep? The animals whose milk we drink. What do these animals have in common? They're domesticated, and even more than that, the type of animal they are. They're mammal. They're herd animals. They're herd animals, which means they're really easy to control. They're easy to control, right? They're easy to keep together. That's right. Because if we wanted the highest amount of calcium in an animal's milk, we should be drinking hyena's milk, because hyena's milk is really high in calcium. But there's a problem with that business model. he'll kill you if you try to take her milk or impregnate her. You get it, right? That's the problem with it, right? The point is that's how arbitrary this is. That it has everything to do with the nature of the animal and nothing to do with the nature of the milk. So we need to skip the middle animal and go directly to the source. Go to the green leafy vegetables, go to the beans, go to the tofu, go to the nuts, and get our calcium from there. Does that make sense? Right? Because this is the kind of myth that's just perpetuated out there, and we all think we have to answer, where do you get your protein, where do you get your calcium? The nutrients we need are plant-based. You can do that same spiel with omega-3 fatty acids. You said omega-3 fatty acids we associate with fish. Where do you think the fish are getting their omega-3 fatty acids from? From the plants. They're getting it from the algae, right? And let me tell you something, you're getting your saturated fat, you're getting your animal protein, you're getting your dietary cholesterol, you're getting some heavy metals thrown in, and when they're farm-raised, and most of the fatty fish are, they're carnivorous fish, so you're also getting the heavy metals even when they're farm-raised, because they're eating fish from the ocean, we're depleting the ocean, and you're getting some antibiotics and pesticides thrown in. Or, you could just have some flax seeds. Or some walnuts. Or you can go directly to DHA, which is what our bodies convert these essential fatty acids into, right? So, skip the middle fish, skip the middle animal, and go directly to the source. The nutrients we need are plant-based, and the diseases that we have are diseases of excess, not deficiency. All right, does that make sense? So those are some of the myths that we tell ourselves around nutrition that stop us from making a change. The other myths have to do with food, eating out and food and eating. And I had, again, this conversation. I love these conversations. So I need to just hang out in bars and talk to people about veganism because I love the randomness of it. And yet they never bring up anything I hadn't heard before. No one's ever said something and I'm like, oh my God, you're right, this isn't working. We can't do this anymore. So a lot of the myths around food, I think, really have more to do with self-perception because we kind of have our perception of ourselves and then we have reality. Because there's never been one person that I haven't said I'm vegan to who didn't say, yeah, I don't eat a lot of meat. I don't really eat a lot of cheese, I don't eat a lot of egg, whatever it is, right? I don't eat a lot of meat, right? Nobody doesn't say this. Or I'll say that more articulately. Everybody says this. Everybody says this, and yet the truth is you don't know how much you eat until you stop. You don't know how much you're doing anything until you stop it, because these are habits. The way we eat, the foods we choose, how we plate our food, all of this has to do with cultural habits and personal habits and familial habits, right? And that's the good news and that's the bad news. It's the bad news because we are fierce creatures of habit, but it's the good news because habits are meant to be broken. We can do that. I mean, that's the principle behind my 30-day vegan challenge, is that you stop long enough to recognize what those habits are, so that you can then lay a new foundation and replace those old habits with new ones. That's the secret to behavior modification. So that's it. That's it, right? Because the thing is, we're looking in one direction our whole lives. We're choosing the same foods over and over again. We're going to the same restaurants over and over again. We're rotating the same meals, picking the same dishes off of those restaurant menus, right? All the time. And then we decide to do something like, let me try it, let me do the 30-day vegan challenge, and we go, so I'm gonna have a hamburger. Oh wait, I'm not doing that. I'm doing the 30-day vegan challenge. What's over here? Oh, this is beauty and abundance over here I never knew existed before. And you look in another direction. People who say that it must be hard, it's because you're only looking through one lens. When you give yourself the opportunity to look through another lens, you see things you never saw before. Cuisines and foods and, restaurants, flavors, ingredients, things that were always there. You just didn't know they were there because you weren't looking at them, right? So, I actually come very much from the belief that being vegan for me is effortless, but change is hard for people. So that's why I do the 30-day vegan challenge and guide people, because I know that the transition, that change is just hard. Just change. Doesn't matter if it's going to be better for you, it's just hard for people. So the transition is so key. Holding your hand through that process so that you have a foundation to stand on by the end, so that when you get over here, this becomes second nature. And this feels really comfortable, and that becomes your new habit. Does that make sense? Right? So that's one of the things we just need to just get over. It's like you don't know how much you eat until you stop. Other myths are just, people who say things like, I tried being vegan, but I craved meat. People who say, anybody say that? I just craved meat, right? And I said, well, you weren't craving meat. They go, no, I was craving meat. And then I had a hamburger and I felt better. I said, you weren't craving meat. We are not obligate carnivores who crave the flesh of another animal. right? We're not lions on the plane who see like gazelles run by and we're like, ooh, it's lunchtime. And we go after the, right? We are not obligate carnivores. We do not crave the flesh of another animal, right? If you want to know what it looks like to crave the flesh of another animal, have you ever seen a domestic cat see a bird or a squirrel? My cats do it all the time. They get like, and you can see their eye, like they just dilate, and their tails start to flicker, and their teeth start to chatter, and they make this little chirping sound. Is that how you get when you see squirrels? When you see like cattle grazing on the side of the road, deer, birds, right? That would be a very scary society to live in. We're all just each other, I don't know. I mean, right? I mean, that's not, please say how we get when we see birds, right? But we don't even get like that if we see an animal who's been hit by a car on the side of the road, right? The first thing we feel is usually disgust. The second thing we feel is compassion. We don't take out our forks and start thinking about lunch, right? So we don't crave the flesh of other animals, but we do crave fat and salt and flavor and familiarity and texture. And I want to be clear that when I say crave, I use this word loosely because we tend to use this word when we want to add credibility to our desires. I'm craving, my body says, and my body's craving, I'm craving. Like there's some physiological imperative we have, right, to have the meat. Because that sounds a lot better than I really want a burger. It just sounds a lot more credible. Like my body, it's not, I didn't do anything, it's my body. I'm out of here. Like I'm not responsible for this at all. I'm just doing what my body says. So I use crave in quotation marks. And even when I talk about fat and salt, it's because that's what we're accustomed to. Because we were taught that the source of fat and salt and texture and flavor and familiarity, the source is meat, dairy, and eggs. We were taught that, this is really about fat. So when someone says, I'm craving meat, no, I'm craving a hamburger. No. What is it that you're really craving? Well, it is fat, it's salt, it's something familiar. I want that thing in a bun, with some ketchup on it. Okay, all right, now we're getting somewhere. And you can then find the source of those things once you realize what's the craving, right? If it's fat, have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Put almond butter in a smoothie. Have guacamole on your burrito. Have an avocado on your sandwich, right? If it's fat, have some nuts, have some seeds, have some nut butter, right? So it's okay, like fat's good. Like, yay, fat, like that's okay. But it's in plants, and so we're just so used to knowing that the source of the fat is animal products as opposed to plants, right? If it's salt, have a little salt. You can have a little salt, right? If you're getting the animal products out of your diet, you're reducing your sodium immensely. So you can afford to have some table salt if you want a little salt, that's okay. And yet I will tell you that your palate changes when you get all of that out of your palate. When you get the fat from the animal products out of your palate, it changes. You don't crave the fat and the salt like you used to. But you can still find the craving and then meet the craving with plant foods. Same thing with flavor, texture, chewiness, mouthfeel, creaminess. You can find all the foods in plant foods to meet those cravings. Does that make sense? Oh, these excuses, my God. And now, then people say things like, well, I could do it. I could be vegetarian, but I couldn't give up X. I could do this, but I couldn't give up X. I could give up everything, but I couldn't give up X. And the X is usually cheese, right? The X is usually cheese. Oh, we're like watching the same channels and stuff, because we're like, y'all know this. So they usually say, I could give up everything, but I could never give up cheese. And I say to them, well, what are you eating now? And they say, well, everything. And I said, well, you just said you could give up everything but cheese. So why don't you give up everything but cheese? Like, don't do nothing because you think you have to do everything. Do something. Start somewhere. Don't sabotage yourself because you really want to do more, but you can't do this one thing, so do what you can. And every step you take will bring you closer to who you want to be and the animals you want to help and the environment you don't want to destroy. Like everything you do will be toward that. But don't do nothing because you can't do everything. Do something. Does that make sense? We sabotage ourselves constantly. I could talk about society, I could talk about culture, I could talk about advertising, and yet we sabotage ourselves all the time. We sabotage ourselves when we say, I thought about being vegan, but then I'd have to chop all those vegetables. I don't want to chop the vegetables. It's just too hard. And then we go to the grocery store and figure out, wow, they're actually chopping the vegetables for us because we don't want to chop them. We're like an anti-chop society. Someone chop for me. I'm too busy. No time. I have no time. Everybody complains about not having any time, right? We're so busy, I don't have any time to chop some vegetables. Part of the problem is that our barometer for chopping vegetables or being in the kitchen is about 0. Like no time at all. So if there's like 5 minutes, it's a lot more than 0. So like, just slow down, right? So I'm just like baby steps. Can we do 5 minutes? Can we do 15 minutes, right? I don't have time, I'm so busy. Yet we have time to get into a car and drive to a restaurant and look for a parking spot and wait for a table and sit down and decide what to order and eat the food and wait for the check and then drive back home again. If we have time to do that, we probably have some time to chop vegetables. Am I wrong? Is that crazy? We have the time. We're just choosing how we want to spend our time, and we're choosing to not chop vegetables. Okay, but let's just be honest, right? Let's just be honest and again, not blame somebody else. Let's just take responsibility for it and chop some vegetables. It doesn't have to take more time than 10 to 15 minutes a day. And if we think we don't have 10 to 15 minutes a day to chop some vegetables, then we might need to reprioritize things. Because we're talking about nurturing our bodies and doing something that's healthy for us and our families, right? Even if you're not vegan, you should be chopping vegetables. You shouldn't just be eating those squirrels running by. Gotta have some vegetables, right? So it doesn't take much longer. I mean, there's so many tips and hints I could give you for chopping those vegetables. One of the problems is we come home from the grocery store and we get really excited to eat these vegetables. And we come home and we put them all in the fridge and we're really excited and it's time to eat. And we go down to the refrigerator and we look and we go, the carrots have their tops on and the cauliflower's still in a bunch and the broccoli's still in a bunch. So you call the pizza guy and you wait for the pizza to come because apparently you have time for that. But I don't want many vegetables. Okay, here's a tip for you. A, if you want to spend more money than time, which is sometimes what we decide to do, then buy the vegetables that have been chopped in advance for you. That's okay, because I'd rather see you get the vegetables in your body, right? I also think if you took a few minutes when you come home from the grocery store, before you put everything in the refrigerator, chop them up, right? Julian, chop up an onion, throw it in the food processor, something so that when you come down to that refrigerator, it's like little elves came down and we chopped the vegetables for you, and now you'll eat them, right? And then the people who go, wait a minute, the nutrients, you're going to lose the nutrients of the vegetables chopped in advance. And I say, really, well, here's a tip for you. Vegetables chopped in advance have more nutrients than no vegetables at all. Little tip, little tip. The excuses we use, I mean, it's unbelievable that I have to spend my time thinking of responses to these excuses. I have other things I want to do, okay? So we need to stop making these excuses, and these are things we can, push back on people when they say them to us. And people get it. People get it. But all of this is just, behavior modification, thought modification, and stop sabotaging ourselves, because ultimately that's what we're doing. And really changing the lens through which we see the world, changing our perception of things. One of the biggest misconceptions about being vegan that I work every day to dispel is that being vegan is an end in itself. Being vegan is an end in itself. Being vegan is not an end in itself. Being vegan isn't a goal to achieve. You don't get a certificate. I'm sorry. I've been waiting. I'm not getting one. You don't get a certificate when you become vegan. You don't get a certificate of perfection and purity. And I think people think that. They think of veganism as an end. And when you do that, you get hung up on purity and perfection. Being vegan for me is a means to an end. And that end is unconditional compassion and optimal wellness. It's the way to get there. It's the best way we've got to get there. But it's not an end in itself. Being vegan, for me, is about living my life with compassion and integrity and doing everything I can to not contribute to violence against animals. That's it. That's it. It's that simple. And so every decision I make is with that intention. It's about creating joy and abundance and meaning in a world so filled with violence and despair. We all want to make a difference. Everybody says they want to make a difference, but I think we forget that in order to make a difference, we may have to do something different. Everybody says they want to make a difference. Everybody says they want to affect change in this world. They want to do something meaningful. And ultimately, people ask me, do you really think it's possible? Do you really think people can make a difference? And my answer is no. I don't think people can make a difference. I know people do make a difference. Everything we do, everything we buy, everything we eat has an impact on someone or something else. We don't get to decide if we can make a difference or not. We get to decide only if the difference we inevitably make is negative or positive. That's it. Those are our only two choices. That's it. Because most of us have these values of compassion and kindness. Most of us say we're against violence. But how many of us actually live according to those values? How many of us actually manifest those values in our everyday behavior? And that's what being vegan is about for me. And that's my hope for everybody. That everybody manifests and reflects in their daily actions, in their daily choices, their deepest values. And know that with every choice we make and every bite we take, we really can create the compassionate world that we want to live in. But it starts with us. And may it be so. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.